Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Side Hustles and Startups, the podcast where we talk to business owners all around the world and get their insider tips just for you. Hi everyone, and hi Val. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you today, and I want to start by just thanking you for agreeing to come onto this podcast. It's fantastic for us to get to meet and to chat, and I'm really looking forward for our audience to hear your story and find out some of the exciting things that you've done in the world of enterprise and business and startups over the years. So would you please start by just introducing yourself, telling me a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then that will kick off the podcast really well.
Well, thank you for those introductory words. I mean, isn't this awful waiting, spending time talking about yourself? I mean, what could be better? Okay, let me start. I was born in Cape Town, South Africa. And my friends always joke that I didn't wear shoes until I was 23, but Anyway, the thing is that I have three sort of prods to my work. There's the Lady Val Professional Women's Network, and let me talk about that first. I was a volunteer director of a training restaurant in Hoxton Square, and it trained people below the radar. It didn't have parental support, no education, no training, no nothing actually. And this restaurant trained them behind the scenes of the kitchen as chef and so on, and of course on the floor as waiters and cocktail waiters as well. And in the time I was there 7 years, I saw miracles. I saw people completely change. I saw them get confidence, and some of them were really, really raw. They had never eaten with a knife and fork, for instance, because they only ate burgers and pizzas. Some of them didn't know about family life at all. Absolute peak experience was they went out to shop for food, came back, of course, under instruction, cooked the food. Then they sat around a table and ate the food, and some of them had never ever done that. So that was the level that we had to deal with. And again, I saw miracles. There was one woman who had four children, and she walked around the square 3 times because she didn't have the confidence to come in. When she finally did, she said, I don't know why I'm here because I've never worked, and my children, all right, they're off my hands, but, I can't give you anything. So the coach said, well, if you had all those children, surely you had some organizational skills. I mean, they had to be somewhere. Oh, yes, she said, they all did things and all that. So she said, well, I think that could be quite useful here. Within 6 months, that woman was head waiter. And this was the illustrations I had in front of me, which stood me in very good stead when I worked in the prison reform sector. So my brief was to get people to the restaurant, and I did this with the Hoxton Apprentice Professional Women's Network, and it was very successful. But then in the 2010 Tory government came in, they decided that they didn't want these pockets of companies doing these recruitment things. They wanted a huge conglomerate to do it. So they stopped our funding. I can't speak about it too much even now because my blood pressure goes up. And it was a shame because we had a statistic that said nearly 70% of the people, our graduates, were still in a job 6 months after they'd left us. So, we did some good work. Anyway, the restaurant had to close, and people begged me to continue with this network. So I started the Lady Val's Professional Women's Network. And we have a motto, which I pinched from Madeleine Albright, a previous Secretary of State in America, which says, there's a special place in hell for any woman who doesn't help another woman. And one of my networkers said, I've changed it. I've said there's a special place in heaven for a woman who helps another woman. And I thought about it. I thought, nah, hell, that works better for me. Anyway, the people who come to the network, and they're senior women, senior executives, business owners, and entrepreneurs, they subscribe to that motto. So I say that we have a caring and sharing network. We have an icebreaker that when they come in, I introduce them to others, and they have to start with, how can I help you, and how can you help me? And this works very well. Amazing contacts have made. So this is, I'm celebrating the 15th anniversary lunch in London on the 30th of November. And if anybody wants to come, there are still a few places left, so contact. Right. So then a cataclysmic help happened in my life. My beloved husband died of lung cancer in 2012. And you know, when somebody dies, offer you lots of cups of tea, and you're very busy doing the funeral and all these things. And I got about 1,000 emails, letters, and cards after he died. He was, in Parliament for 34 years, so a lot of people knew him. And then a few weeks later, people kind of think, she ought to be able to manage by now. But it's then that you're at your lowest, because then reality has really, really strikes. So I was looking at television one day, feeling very miserable, and trying to find something on television that would interest me. I came across, for some reason, the Ryder Cup. Now, I don't play golf. I have absolutely no interest in golf. It was a competition between America and Europe, and the Europeans won, which I was pleased about. And the captain dedicated the win to his friend Sevi Ballesteros, who had recently died. And he said these words: all men die, but some men live on. And I sat up, and it was a real eureka moment, the apple falling from the tree. I thought, that's what I want to do. That is exactly what I need to do. I need to get Robin's legacy honored and hopefully live on. So I thought, what shall I do? What angle? He was very involved in so many campaigns. But the one thing that I'm very proud of is that his private members bill. Now, private members bill never gets in, or rarely gets into law. And when he phoned me to say, I've got number 2 on the private members bill, I went, oh, lovely, lovely. But I thought, there. Anyway, he decided to make a plea for rape victims. And it was a Friday in the House of Commons. Quite a there were a lot of people there. Sorry, it's my teeth. And there was one member on the opposite side who was very against the bill. And he talked and talked and talked and filibustered it. And suddenly, unfortunately for him, he had to answer a call of nature. They rushed out, and as soon as he was rushed out, the speaker said, "Let's vote," and there was unanimously. And the law which still stands is granting anonymity, lifetime anonymity, for victims of rape in the courts and the media, unless, of course, they want to go public, and some do, very, very, I think, extremely brave. Anyway.
Val, could I just ask, when did that get passed then? When did that law get passed?
In the late 70s.
Late 70s, right, thank you.
I think it's the Sexual Offences Act 19, something like that. Now you've put me off my stroke,
I was doing well. That was the first question I've asked since the introduction. So I was trying to bide my time. So
a lot of people think that you have to wait for me to breathe before you can come in.
No, well, look, thank you very much for sharing that introduction. Do you know how you wanted to carry on that line of thought then, or do you want me to hang on a minute before I ask any more questions?
Well, you can ask a question away. No. Let me just finish this one thought. So, for 10 years until he died, he was chair of the prison reform as penal affairs group in all party penal affairs group in Parliament. And when he took the job, uh, unpaid, of course, all Corbett jobs are unpaid, as he very often pointed out to me. Um, his colleagues said, don't do prisons. It's very unpopular and it will harm your career. Well, he took no notice. And it was that kind of stubbornness that made me think that's the area that I want to go to. Now you can ask your question.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for that introduction and for explaining that last part so well. So I like golf as well. So that was interesting that you mentioned the Ryder Cup. So yeah, great words that were spoken, and it's interesting that inspired you onto this new pathway that you took. So would you mind explaining what you do at the moment then? So you've mentioned the Corbett network, um, and then you've mentioned that your desire to want to focus specifically in the reform prisons in that kind of space. So would you mind sharing what you're doing today, please?
Right. Today, I've got two networks devoted to prison reform. The first one is the Robin Corbett Award for Prison Reintegration, which I started in 2013 with the Prison Reform Trust. And we have a sponsor which gives £10,000 to three um, winners who do the most to support people from prison. And it's we did our 10th presentation in the House of Commons in June this year, um, and that's an annual one. So the Corbett Network for Prison Reintegration is a coalition of organizations who work day to day with people either in prison or out of prison. And they focus very much on jobs because there's a very high reoffending rate. We have the highest reoffending rate in Western Europe. With young men, within 2 years, over 50% go back. But that falls to 19% when they have a job. So the jobs are very necessary, but they can't come out of prison on a Monday and start a job on a Tuesday. It doesn't work like that. So you have to risk assess, you have to make ready. Some of them have licenses which preclude them from going into certain conditions. And so it's quite a labyrinth of rules and things that you have to pass, but our members are very aware of that and they do that. But we also offer mentoring, coaching, education, and training, and all of those are very necessary. I mean, there's one member, Maggie Walsh, who's chief executive of A Fairer Chance, and she says when they come out of prison, they need three things: they need something to do, somewhere to live, and someone who gives a damn. And in my opinion, the last one is definitely the most important.
Oh, thank you. That's really inspiring me listening to you talk then and explaining those three things there. Because that's how we met, of course, isn't it? Is the work the Rocketeer do at the moment. As you know, we do some educational work in prisons, and we're actually moving on to try and provide more support when people leave prisons through our business startup programs. And so hearing you say those three things there is just reminded me of a young man that we're working with at the moment, and us being able to meet with him and support him and be there for him. He has said that it is helping him to try and walk that straight pathway when there is a temptation to go back to some of the things that he was connected in the past. And he's got somewhere to live, and having something to do is he's found that a challenge as well. Because he's connected with potential immigration. And so, ironically, he's not allowed to work. He's not allowed to earn any money. He's not even allowed to do education until there is a decision made on what he's doing at the moment. So it's great to hear you explain that your network is bringing together organizations and people that are working in this space. And it's fantastic because, of course, what some people sometimes forget is that people that leave prison, they're reintegrating back into our communities and they're living with us, they're living with our families. So the more we can help them reintegrate in a potentially better way, not only does it benefit them, it benefits the communities and it benefits all of us as a wider society. So I take my hat off to you. Fantastic work that you're doing. And I've got a question I'd like to ask, Val. I mean, of course, you've alluded to the fact that you've worked with supporting business women and women in general. Have you got any words or ideas or thoughts for women, young women, maybe moms at home, in regards to how they might want to consider following a passion, following an interest, maybe considering a side hustle to earn some extra money, especially in these challenging days today of austerity and increasing costs everywhere. So any words of wisdom or thoughts or ideas to encourage our female listeners?
You're talking about a vast number of disparate and diverse professions and ideas. If people haven't worked, people going back after having children, that's completely different to somebody who's been made redundant and so on. The route that I found, I used to be chair of Women's Aid in this area, and we had a very, very active committee. And I remember one woman coming in. She had two small children. She'd never been to work. And she came regularly. We used to have, I was a working chair. I was on duty on 1 day a week and every 6th weekend. And she came regularly to our Tuesday meetings and then was on call and volunteered for some time. That woman today is chair of a housing association. Another one went back to university and all that. The great thing about volunteering, and you have to choose one that is your passion, but if you volunteer on a particular thing, it looks terrific on your CV apart from anything else, but you're also getting an awful lot of experience. You're getting a part, working as a team, for instance, doing that. So that's one area that I think people can consider. And my goodness, volunteers are really needed at the moment. If you're redundant, the confidence goes, and I find that people don't want to get out of bed and so on. And again, you need to focus on your mental health, and you need to get support. A lot of people, a lot of women particularly, think they've got to manage, and I don't agree with that. I don't think you need to manage. I think you need to let it out. And it's why women have a lot of friends that they can talk to, because they talk about feelings, which men, they don't like feelings. I remember a friend of ours got split up with his wife, and Robin took him for a drink. And when he came home, I said, "How is he?" He said, "He's fine. He's fine." I said, did you find out why? Because they seemed so happy together. He said, "Well, things, things." I said, "You didn't talk about it, did you? What did you talk about?" "Oh, football and politics." So the thing is, you have to talk to your friends. I talked to a friend. You remember one of our, we were supposed to meet and I completely forgot about it, if you remember. And I said to a friend of mine, why did I forget? I mean, it was in my diary and everything. And she said, "You've got so much in your brain, it's leaking." So I told you about that, and that was my excuse. Anyway, yes, you have to talk. You have to talk about your problems and your redundancy. I was made redundant actually very early in my career in this country. I was a journalist, and the magazine folded. I was very, very miserable. And I sat here in this very chair and had a cup of coffee and thought, "Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa." And then I suddenly thought, um, I need to get out there and try. Now I've got to say that at that time, jobs were very much more able to be able to be advertised as it is now. I mean, the situation now is dire, but at that time you could get another job, and so I started getting involved with trying to get a job, and I did eventually. But you know, uh, it's very cold comfort for me to say, oh, if you're made redundant and you're depressed, get support. It's much more difficult than that, but you need to do that. You can't just sit on your own. I know somebody who stayed in bed for 3 days until I got her up. But it's a terrible question to ask. I haven't thought about it.
Well, thank you for your answer, and that answer, I really do believe it's going to connect with our viewers and our listeners, because it's already made me think about a few people in my life. And in particular, I really, really like your idea around the volunteering, because often, like, as you're alluding to sometimes think about what we think we might need can be quite difficult, because there's a lot of complex feelings and thoughts and emotions that go through our lives on a daily basis when we're feeling up and down. Whereas I really like your ideas around actually shifting it away from thinking about what you necessarily need and thinking about how can I help other people. So if you've got the time and you can go and volunteer, I love the fact that it's developing skill sets. It's great for your CV. And then you're going to make friends, you're going to meet people, you're going to make connections. And I think as humans, that's one of the things that we definitely strive off is, I mean, look how COVID affected a lot of people's mental health, because they just couldn't talk to people, couldn't talk to family. And so you think that that was a difficult question to answer, but I think you answered it in a really, really helpful way. So
Thank you.
that was great. Thanks. So well, look, it's been really interesting to chat to you, and I found it fascinating listening to some of the things that you're doing at the moment. Um, is there anything that, again, just kind of maybe? There's a question I always ask people that come on these, actually. And I know with hindsight, you'll say, well, that's easy to answer now. But if you could go back to the Val of 20, 25, 30 years ago, that was maybe starting to think about what you might do with your life, maybe as you started to think about employment routes and what you might want to do for a career, is there anything that you would, any particular tips or what you might say to a younger you on this new journey that you're about to go on?
Well, I'm slightly different because when I was 12, somebody, and I wish I could remember who, said to me, "You ask an awful lot of questions. You should be a journalist." And I said, "Oh, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, and she explained what a journalist did." And I said, "You mean you get paid for asking questions?" I want to be a journalist. So, so I was set on that route, and my only route in Cape Town was to get to Fleet Street, which was then the mecca of journalism, and I did. And I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. I went for an interview with the editor of the Sunday Express, and I found out afterwards that he was very keen on women's legs. Now I have very good legs, very good legs, but only from the knees down. So, but those were the ones on show. So I got the job, and very inexperienced. Not. I mean, I was 18 months in this country, and so very inexperienced. Never worked on a national news. Well, I worked on I was a trainee journalist in Cape Town and so on. Anyway, I then was introduced to a man who was I think he's dead now. I hope he's dead. A man called Arthur Brenner. And he hated me on sight, nothing to do with me, but he kept on getting these women with good legs from the roof down. And he had no intention of helping me. He once gave me a story I'll never forget. He gave me two stories that he asked me at Christmas, I think 2 days before Christmas, to phone the head of Bristol Post Office to inquire why a stamp machine in the high street in a suburb of Bristol wasn't working. And I got through to the man's PA, and I said, "This is in front of the stamp explainer." And she said, "You are joking, aren't you?"
Oh my gosh.
So
That
of course
was
I
that
didn't
was
get the quote, and Arthur said, "Typical, typical." And then I had to phone a verger's wife whose husband was allegedly having an affair with somebody in the congregation. And she burst out crying. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
I'm so sorry, but please can you give me a quote?
No, I couldn't. I could not do it. Anyway, so I was in the pub with all the respect people, and I said loudly, there's not space on the Sunday Express for Arthur and me. One of us has got to go, and it's going to be him. And somebody said, "Hi, Arthur." I went, and I turned around, and it was him. My days were numbered. Numbers. Anyway, sorry about that. I was going, what would I do differently?
Well, not necessarily what you do differently, but
Oh,
what advice would you give your younger self?
I think I would say confidence. Now, I have a very pretty sister, and all my life I was growing up with Val's got the brains and June's got the beauty. And I remember stamping my foot once and I went, "I want about the beauty." So I always had this kind of thing about my looks that I wasn't quite, but I have seen some photographs of me, at that time, and I was gorgeous, gorgeous. And the confidence that I did not have, that's what I would have. If I could be a fairy godmother and tell all these young women, "You are beautiful, you are special, you are great." I would actually like to do that, because the lack of confidence that we've never had a glass ceiling, that. What we've had is the lack of confidence to smash it. And
I, I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a feminist. I'm an equalist. I consider gender inequality should be they should have the guillotine back for that. I mean, there's no logic to me in doing the same job, and your gender is the reason that you're getting less money than the other man than the man. It's illogical, and a lot of companies still do it, and a lot of companies do it. Anyway, so that the confidence factor is absolutely crucial when you're young. I mean, also, I want to tell them nobody is looking at you, because you go out, you think, "Oh, I haven't got this dress on. It's not. Oh, nobody cares. I haven't got good shoes." Only women look at shoes. Men never notice shoes. So confidence is the thing that I would literally do, and I wish I'd had that confidence then. I think I would have gone. Maybe I could have been queen if I'd had that confidence.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. There's a couple of things there that it's fascinating listening to you talk through, and I love those stories. Thanks for sharing those. There's two things that jumped out for me that I can definitely relate to when we're sharing this with our students around business, and that was when you talked about you naturally asked questions as a young girl. And then the other thing that jumped out at me was the fact that you had this vision of Fleet Street. You knew where you wanted to get to. And from the work I've done and bits and bobs that I've learned and picked up on my journey, the moment you get a vision of something that you want, and it can just be a light bulb moment, it can be an instantaneous thing. It's quite amazing what we're capable of, human beings, when we suddenly decide that we want something. I say to people, when we know we want something, sometimes we don't need a course. We don't need to be told how to do it. Sometimes when we want something, we're that empowered that we can just go and make it happen. And one of the ways I've found that we can do this is by asking effective questions. And it seems that when you were young, you were already getting into this mindset of what inquiring and wanting to know about the world and asking questions. And so I think that for anyone that was listening and maybe they really like the tip around building up the confidence, one thing I'd say to them is start asking the questions: is how can I become confident? Where do I get my confidence from? Is there someone I know who's confident that I could go and ask them what they do? And that ability to ask what I call power questions, the brain is so powerful, it can then start to work on how it can answer those questions. And the caveat there for everyone who's watching and listening is you don't need to know the answer of how you're going to do it. You just need to ask the questions, and then your brain will start to formulate ways to get there. Out of a matter of interest, Val, how did you move? Where did the I want to go to Fleet Street come from? And then I suppose it was when you learned about the journalism. But then how did you get there? How did the world start to work in a mysterious way to start to support you on that journey?
Well, it was very difficult, very difficult, because I wasn't a member of the National Union of Journalists. I never heard of them. And at the time, the NUJ was the most powerful trade union within the journalism section. The printers were pretty powerful, but this was the journalism one. And I couldn't get a member to be a member without a job. But to get a job, I had to become a member. So I found, put it this way, I went traveling for 6 weeks. Ridiculous, if it's Tuesday, it must be Switzerland, and on Wednesday, and I came back. And had no money. I had all I had was hard-boiled eggs. It took me years to eat a hard-boiled egg again. But I found some reason, I can't remember just how, I met this man called Alan Johnson, who was doing a magazine for the Spar Grocery Group. And so he made me editor. And I said, well, I haven't got the NUJ. He said, that's okay. You'll get the job and then you get the membership, which is exactly what I did. And I then became an editor. I'm doing nothing. I was an editor of a woman's magazine. Okay, so given away in Spar grocery shops. But I had such fun doing it. First of all, there was no staff. I had a secretary, but no staff. So I was the editor. I was Jan Kennedy, the beauty editor. I was Anne Graham, the fashion editor. I was Green Fingers, and I was Patient Strong, the agony columnist.
So you're wearing all these different hats.
All these different hats. And then once I'm no good at knitting and sewing and all that, but I did this knitting pattern, and there were loads of complaints because the photograph showed the polo neck, and this was a completely different pattern. And my boss called me in and said, why have you done that? I said, it proves that the magazine is so popular because all these people are found. So, and then, of course, the Spar group decided that they didn't need Alan Johnson, so they gave me the job, which I was sad about, but they'd made the decision anyway, and we parted on good terms. So then it was upgraded, and we went into Fleet Street with a thing called Good Life, which again was a very popular paper, and then Good Life came out and was very good. And the second episode, the second monthly came out, and then the printers went on strike, and they were on strike for a long time. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks. And they said, we will have to then launch it again, and we haven't got the money. So they closed the magazine. That's when I was sitting here. So I've had ups and downs and rocks in my road. I mean, it sounds as if I've had a lovely life, and I have. But um, adversity makes you strong. I had a very unhappy childhood. My father was, well, the reason I went into women's aid was that my father was an abuser, physical abuser. And so, I look as if I've had, lovely things. And I have had lovely things. And I've had a very fortunate life, a lovely marriage. Who's on the Daily Mirror every Wednesday, Holly Hudson. And she decided that she never wanted to be a journalist because both of her parents were. And guess what? Genetically, I'm afraid she's a good writer. And I have a grandson who's also a good writer, which he should do because he's got 6 people in his genetic past and present who are writers. So, I mean, I'm hoping when he was born, they said he was going to be called Albie. And I said, oh, absolutely not. You can call him Albie, but you must christen him Albert, because how can an Albie be prime minister? How can he be a barrister? He's not taken seriously. You've got to be Albert. And so he's now Albert to me and a lot of people. He doesn't mind actually calling, he doesn't mind what he calls. When you look at celebrities and things, you think, oh, they must have such wonderful lives. They don't. They've had lives like I've just described, up and down, up and down. Troubles, problems, and some very nice interludes, which, you think, oh, that was a lovely time and all that.
I remember reading Anthony Robbins, one of his books.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember him saying...
Old Tony, as it's called.
Tony, yes, Tony Robbins. And I remember him, I remember one of his books, and it said, he said the difference between rich people and not so rich people is that rich people still have problems. It's just that they arrive at them in style.
Well, they say money doesn't mean anything, but you can be more miserable in a Rolls Royce than you can on a bicycle.
That's right. Quick last question for you then, Val, as we get towards the end of the podcast. You just talked and alluded about writing being in the genes of your family. A technology question. So I take it you must have heard of Chat GPT and maybe come across that.
I do.
So I was actually talking with Freddie, a colleague of mine who you've been introduced to before. And Freddie was telling me last night that there is a young man who went on Chat GPT, got it to write a book, and he also used the, I think it's called DALL-E, DALL-E, which is an AI software package where you can basically type in words and information and it gives you an image. So he wrote the book using ChatGPT, and then he actually got the images created by an AI software as well to do all the illustrations. So he basically didn't do any of it, and he is now selling that. So I just wondered what you thought about the development and evolution of the technology and how it's impacting things like writing and design and creativity.
Well, 2 things. I had a woman talking to my network a few years ago, and she was a futurist. She was going to say what's happening in the future. And I have quite straight hair, but when she finished, my hair was curly because the things that she was saying, which were going to happen within 10 or 15 years, have all come true. I have used chatbot, and I don't like it because I've got a particular style of how I write, and so I did this a couple of times, and they sent me the stuff, and I could take 1 or 2 sentences out, but frankly, I thought I could do it better. I haven't done a book and all that. I mean, actually, I've written several books. They were all 9 to 5, plodding away at the computer. So good luck to this guy if he does it. But I mean, it's a cheat, isn't it? Because he didn't do it. So you can't hold back progress. You cannot. AI is coming, and we've had AI for years. Alexa is AI. All these things that we rely on, they're all based on AI. So it's been there for a long time. But now it's obviously we're going to have robots and things, but not, I don't think, for a long time, I hope. Mind you, they can do housework, they can certainly do it quickly. So I think that AI is obviously a problem, or going to be a problem, because when we have driverless cars, taxi drivers are going to lose jobs, truck drivers are going to lose jobs, leasing cars will lose jobs, hundreds of jobs on just that one profession. So it's going to be difficult. But then you think back in history with the Luddites, who were destroying machines because they were taking the jobs. They got over it. They found other jobs. So I'm hoping that the same thing will happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you say that, because when I hear back and think about Victorian times and also the development of farming and farm machinery, and when we moved away from the horses and the plows to the tractors, and jobs change, and so I think that there's still going to be lots and lots of jobs and lots of work. It just creates new opportunities.
And there's great strides. Just today, I read about a fourpence pill that's going to help and cure, well, not cure, but a breast cancer pill that's going to, stop people having breast cancer. I mean, they're having new things all the time, and so I remain optimistic. I'm actually a pessimist, but normally a pessimist. But now, you know what they say: a pessimist is just an optimist with less. No, a pessimist is just an optimist with more facts.
That's fantastic, and that's a great place to end the podcast. It's been a pleasure, and I want to thank you for taking the time, Val. A little in joke between us, but we got there in the end. I look forward to that tea and that cake that you.
Oh yes, absolutely.
When we get to meet. Well, it's been a pleasure to meet. Thank you so much for answering the questions, and I hope that our audience, viewers and listeners, have found it as interesting as I have. And thank you very much. Maybe we'll get you back again when Albert moves on with his career, and we can find what he's up to. All right. Thank you, Val.
Okay. Thanks a lot. All right. Bye.
We've come to the end of the podcast, and if you're interested in being on a podcast with me, then please do get in touch. Even if you haven't yet started a business or you're thinking of a side hustle, it'd be great to have you on our podcast series, because there's so many people just like you starting to think about how they can earn some extra money and maybe get started with their own business, so you and they can create your own future.